The member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And Deputy Speaker, can I firstly acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet and pay respect to the elders past and present, the Ngunawal and Ngambri people, as the foundation of this discussion about the celebration of NAIDOC Week. And I want to do so also by thanking in particular my esteemed colleague, the member for Berowra, for bringing this motion on to acknowledge the critical role that NAIDOC Week plays in the celebration of our national life and culture. And while it was only a couple of weeks ago, that the spirit that sits behind NAIDOC Week is not something we need contained to the week, but something that we can celebrate as part of the ongoing continuum of our country year round. And that is what we are ultimately celebrating in NAIDOC Week. Not a moment, not a day, but the continuation of a culture surviving for more than 65,000 people on, let's face it, one of the most arduous and challenging continents on Earth. And of course, against the backdrop of European settlement and the consequences that have come for that for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. And that's why the theme of always was, always will be is such a critical theme, because it's about that continuum. And that while there may have been moments of disruption, that we celebrate the contribution of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, as the member previous remarked, as the first explorers, first navigators, first engineers, first farmers, first botanists, first scientists, first diplomats, first astronomers, first artists, but first owners, first cultivators, first contributors, and first celebrators of the earth that sits beneath our feet. And that is something we should celebrate critically for 1 week, but is something that we should celebrate year round, because it's part of our journey as a country. And while we go through discussions about what should be in the Constitution or other legislative proposals for recognising the critical role of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders and making sure they have their voice, not just to our nation's parliament, but of course to address the historical injustices that have confronted them, we must always recognise that continuum, and that the objective is not to have separate mobs, but to have one mob, where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders recognise the contribution that all Australians make, and that we recognise the contribution that they make. And I was particularly touched many years ago when I went to a recognised dinner where this point was made critically by that incredible Indigenous leader and daughter of another incredible Indigenous leader, Rachel Perkins, who's always been both pragmatic but romantic, and I say that as a compliment, about the role that we all have in the continuum of this country and its future. And we should do so because there is so much that we as all Australians can learn from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders through their arts, their culture, their cultivation and their respect for this land. And one of the issues that we all must confront is the consequences of denying culture, and particularly of the erosion of languages. Because languages are not just the pathway, obviously, to communicate, but sitting behind them are so many of the values, and sitting behind them are so many of the stories that pre-existed the codification through modern European settlement. Some of them survive in artworks, but we must keep them alive today. And it's also an opportunity, or NAIDOC Week is also an opportunity, to celebrate the incredible contributions of many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who have made their contribution to the success of our country. And I know the member for Berowra referred specifically to William Cooper, who is one of the most significant people in our country, regardless of their indigeneity. It just adds even greater weight because of the specific challenges that Indigenous Australians were focusing at the time. To be bold and courageous enough to stand up for people across the world and to say no more. And this is not the type of conduct that we will accept. And of course, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who've made their way into this parliament and have made an incredible contribution to this parliament as well. And I always remember, of course, the first Indigenous Senator, Neville Bonner from the great state of Queensland, is followed by many other Indigenous leaders who represent all communities in this parliament today. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member.